As Jake Dalton keyed in the emergency override, the ship's warning systems blared, echoing through the steel halls of the Endeavour. He wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes fixed on the flickering screens that showed the encroaching meteor storm a deadly ballet of cosmic violence. Around him, the alien crew muttered in their various tongues, voices tinged with a mix of panic and disdain. Should have known better than to trust a human with the helm, one snorted loudly in Galactic common, not bothering to lower his voice. Jake's hands clenched on the console. Watch closely, he growled, his voice cold and steady. You might learn something about humans today. As the first meteor slammed into the shields, Jake's fingers danced across the controls, plotting a path through the chaos with a defiance that silenced the room. The Endeavour sliced through the vacuum of space, its engines humming a steady chorus against the backdrop of the Andromeda Galaxy. Inside, the atmosphere was less harmonious. Engineer Jake Dalton monitored the ship's aging systems, his brow furrowed as he deciphered the flickering readings from his console. Not sure why Command keeps these old buckets running, Jake muttered, tapping the dashboard as if it would coax more cooperation from the equipment. Beside him, Thrix, a tall, iridescent Grelsham crew member, flicked his slender antennae dismissively. Perhaps if your species invested more in technology rather than incessant exploration, you'd have better ships, human. Jake shot him a sideways glance but held his tongue. It wasn't the first jab at human capabilities, nor would it be the last. He turned back to his console, checking the ship's trajectory and environmental stats. All clear for now? Suddenly, a sharp buzz split the air, and the deck shuddered beneath their feet. Warning lights blinked into life across the dashboard, painting the room in urgent reds. What in the Jake started, but was cut off by the ship's AI, Ida, whose voice came calm and detached through the commotion. Alert, uncharted cosmic storm detected. Immediate course correction required. Thrix snorted, his voice tinged with panic and disdain. Brilliant, just what we need. Can your primitive human reflexes handle this, Dalton? Ignoring the comment, Jake's fingers flew over the control panel, plotting a new course to skirt the storm. But as he adjusted their path, the sensors flared again. The storm was shifting, expanding rapidly to engulf their planned route. Damn it! Jake cursed under his breath. He recalibrated, trying another escape route. The ship groaned as turbulent forces from the outer edges of the storm tugged at its hull. Jake could feel the doubt radiating from his crewmates, their unease palpable in the cramped bridge. Ida, manual controls, Jake commanded, deciding to trust his instincts over the ship's outdated autopilot. The console changed under his hands, levers and manual override switches sliding into place. As he gripped the controls, Thrix's voice cut through again, sharp with fear and mockery. You're going to get us killed, human! Jake ignored him, focusing instead on the swirling mass of cosmic energy displayed on the screen ahead. He dipped the ship, steering them into a dive that felt like falling off a cliff. The Endeavour protested, metal creaking and screens flickering from the strain. Hold on! Jake yelled, his voice steady despite the chaos. He navigated through the densest parts of the storm, relying on human intuition and the little feedback his shaking instruments provided. Minutes stretched like hours, but finally, the ship began to clear the outer bands of the storm. The violent shudders lessened, the warning lights dimmed, and the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. As they emerged from the tempest, Jake didn't need to look at Thrix to feel the shift in the air. The bridge was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the ship returning to normal. Nice flying, human, Thrix finally said, the grudging respect in his voice more satisfying to Jake than any apology. As the Endeavour steadied itself from the turbulent escape, the aftermath within its walls was palpable. The corridors echoed with the crew's movements, their relief mixed with a renewed urgency to assess and repair. Jake Dalton, his coveralls smeared with grease, led the damage assessment team through the bowels of the ship. The dim lighting flickered as they passed, reflecting the ship's battered state. Let's prioritize life support and propulsion, he instructed, his voice echoing off the metal walls. Check every junction box and seal along the way. A junior engineer, a sprightly Cervidian named Lisa, trailed him, her 4 eyes wide with concern. What if we hit another storm like that? She asked, her voice quivering slightly. Jake glanced back, offering a reassuring grin. We'll handle it. One crisis at a time, right? They stopped at a junction where sparks sizzled from an exposed panel. Kneeling, Jake pried the panel open wider, revealing a mess of fried circuits. Here's our culprit for the flickering lights, he muttered, digging into his tool belt for a soldering iron. As he worked, Thrix appeared at the junction, his gaze lingering on the exposed wires. Seems you humans are good for more than I thought, he remarked, a hint of respect threading his usual sarcasm. Jake didn't look up. Glad you noticed. You can start by helping Lisa with the life support check. We can't afford any downtime on that system. Thrix nodded, a rare moment of compliance, and moved to assist Lisa, who was already pulling up diagnostics on a handheld device. The repair session stretched on, with Jake leading and teaching, his hands and mind never still. He explained the function of each component they mended, ensuring even the least experienced crew members learned something valuable. Hours later, as they replaced the last fused relay, the ship's primary systems hummed back to life. The artificial gravity stabilized, and the air recyclers kicked in with a low, steady hum, drawing a collective sigh of relief from the team. Jake wiped his brow and stood back, surveying the corridor now bustling with activity. All right, team, let's regroup in the mess hall in 20. We need to strategize our next steps and ensure we're prepared if we encounter more anomalies. Jake addressed the group, his voice firm. We've made great strides in getting the Endeavor back in shape, but we're not out of the woods yet. I need everyone's eyes sharp and minds alert. We're heading into uncharted space, and every sensor, every reading could be crucial. In the days following the repairs, the Endeavor ventured deeper into uncharted territories. With the ship restored to operational status, the crew's morale had visibly improved, yet the tension of navigating the unknown kept everyone on edge. Jake Dalton continued to lead from the front, his role as chief engineer blending increasingly with that of an informal captain, as the crew, both human and alien, began to look to him for guidance. During a routine system check, Jake noticed a slight fluctuation in the engine's core temperature, nothing alarming yet, but enough to warrant a closer inspection. Kiro, take a look at this, Jake called over to a Talarian mechanic, pointing at the data pad's fluctuating numbers. Kiro, whose species was known for their meticulous nature, furrowed his brow as he examined the readings. It seems minor, but in this region of space, even a small anomaly can escalate quickly, Kiro noted, his voice reflecting the weight of every potential risk. Let's do a full diagnostic. Better safe than sorry, Jake decided, clapping Kiro on the shoulder as they headed towards the engine room. As they worked side by side in the cramped space of the engine room, the trust and respect between them grew. The former skepticism about Jake's abilities had lessened significantly, replaced by an acknowledgement of his expertise and leadership. Suddenly, the ship trembled, a low rumble that grew into a cacophony of clanging and hissing. We've hit a magnetic storm. Ida, the ship's AI, announced over the comm system. All hands brace for turbulence, Jake shouted, securing tools and loose panels as the ship bucked like a wild animal. The crew rushed to their stations, enacting the protocols Jake had drilled into them over the past weeks. The storm was fierce, bombarding the Endeavor with electromagnetic pulses that wreaked havoc on electronic systems. Jake coordinated with the crew, directing them to shield sensitive equipment and reroute power to maintain essential functions. In the midst of the chaos, Thrix approached Jake, his earlier arrogance replaced by a grave concern. Dalton, if we don't stabilize the magnetic shields, we'll lose navigation completely. Jake nodded, already pulling up the shield schematics. On it. Thrix, help me reroute the auxiliary power. Your claws are better at handling these tiny components than my fingers. Working together, human and alien hands moved with precision to adjust the power flow. Gradually, The ship's shuddering eased as the shields strengthened, providing a bulwark against the storm's relentless assault. Once the danger had passed, the crew gathered in the common area, visibly shaken but alive. Jake took a moment to address them, his voice steady and reassuring. Everyone did a fantastic job today. These are the kinds of challenges we prepared for, and I'm proud to say we're more than capable of handling them thanks to each of you. The Endeavour finally emerged from the magnetic storm, slightly worse for wear but largely intact, thanks to the crew's concerted efforts. As they approached the next waypoint, a well-known interstellar trading post, Jake planned to resupply and conduct a thorough inspection of the ship's systems. Jake and his team docked at the station, a bustling hub teeming with species from across the galaxy. As they stepped onto the platform, the diversity of the galaxy was on full display, with traders shouting in a dozen languages and goods from hundreds of worlds changing hands. "Never gets old, does it?" Jake remarked to Kiro, who was scanning the crowd with wide eyes. "Not at all," Kiro replied, his voice tinged with awe. As Jake negotiated for parts with the vendor, a hushed conversation between two alien crew members reached his ears. Their tones were conspiratorial, their glances towards him tinged with resentment. He caught phrases like "too much control" and "needs to be checked." Jake's stomach tightened, but he filed the information away for later consideration. After resupplying, Jake convened a meeting with the crew in the Endeavour's main conference room. "Thanks to everyone's hard work, we've managed to navigate through some tough spots," he began, his eyes sweeping over the faces before him. "Now I want to discuss our next steps and address any concerns." The meeting progressed smoothly until Thrix, the previously skeptical crew member, stood up. "Jake, you've led us well through some dangers, but this doesn't mean we should accept human leadership without question. We need checks and balances." Jake nodded, appreciating the point. "Absolutely, Thrix. I'm open to suggestions on how we can improve our command structure." The discussion that followed was intense but constructive, with various crew members proposing ideas for a more integrated leadership model. However, the undercurrent of unease persisted, a reminder of the fragile peace Jake had been navigating. Late that night, while reviewing the ship's logs, Jake discovered an unauthorized access to the navigation systems. His heart raced as he traced the activity back to one of the resentful crew members he had overheard earlier. Without alerting the potential saboteur, Jake set up a discreet surveillance measure and convened a small trusted group, including Kiro and Lisa. "We have a possible saboteur on board," he disclosed, showing them the evidence. "We need to handle this delicately. Our unity is at stake." The team agreed to monitor the situation closely, while Jake continued to demonstrate open and fair leadership, hoping to win over any wavering loyalties through transparency and inclusion. 2 days later, the saboteur made their move, attempting to alter the ship's course subtly. The surveillance measures caught them in the act, and Jake was forced to act. He confronted the saboteur in front of the crew, presenting the evidence calmly but firmly. The crew member, caught red-handed, confessed, citing fears of human dominance as their motive. The Endeavour was now on the final leg of its journey, the stars streaking past as it cruised through the silence of space. The atmosphere aboard was one of cautious optimism, tempered by the recent events of sabotage and reconciliation. Jake Dalton stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the viewport, reflecting on the journey that had transformed his crew from a divided group into a cohesive unit. As they approached human-controlled space, Jake decided it was time for a final crew meeting. He gathered everyone in the common area, where the tension of past conflicts had once hung heavy. Now, the room buzzed with a different energy, one of collaboration and mutual respect. "Team," Jake began, his voice resonant in the quiet hum of the ship's engines, "as we near the end of our mission, I want to acknowledge the journey we've taken. Not just across the galaxy, but the one we've taken together, from mistrust to understanding." He paused, meeting the eyes of his crew members, including Thrix, who had challenged him openly. Thrix nodded slightly, a gesture of respect earned through trials. "We've seen that challenges don't just come from outside threats, storms, or navigation hazards, but also from within. It's how we face those challenges that defines us, Jake continued, his tone imbued with the weight of their experiences. Lisa, the junior engineer who had once questioned their survival, raised her hand. Jake, I think I speak for many of us when I say, thank you. You didn't just keep us alive, you showed us the strength of leadership and the value of every individual, regardless of species. The room erupted in agreement, a chorus of voices from beings who once doubted the capability of a human leader. Jake smiled, his heart lightened by their words. Thank you, Lisa. Going forward, our mission reports will not only speak of the anomalies we charted but also of our growth as a crew. We have a chance to influence how missions are conducted in the future, how crews are trained and integrated. He turned to a console, pulling up a chart of their journey, dotted with incidents and milestones. Each of these points represents a moment where we could have fallen apart but chose to come together instead. Let's continue that unity as we return home. As the meeting disbanded, Jake stayed back to send the final mission report to command. His report detailed not just their scientific findings, but the interpersonal dynamics and the lessons learned about leadership and cooperation. He recommended policy changes for future missions to better integrate multi-species crews, emphasizing the successful outcomes of their newfound unity. The journey back to Earth was uneventful but filled with a sense of achievement. When the Endeavour finally docked at the International Space Station, the crew was met with cheers and applause. News of their successful navigation through crises, both environmental and internal, had spread, making their return a celebrated event. Jake stepped off the ship last, his crew clustered around him, no longer just a group of individuals but a testament to the strength of diverse beings working together. As they faced the cameras and the questions from the press, Jake felt a profound sense of pride. This mission, he said, addressing the crowd, shows that in the vastness of space, our greatest asset is each other.